Storytime with Stephanie
Hi,
Storey.
I am art historical novelist Stephanie Storey. Welcome to my show, Storytime, where I get to talk to other writers about their passions and processes and storytelling and all of these things we all care so much about. I'm very excited for my guest today because in addition to being a member of the United States Air Force since 2004, he's actually leaving for another tour of duty early next year. Wow, that's crazy to me, and I have questions. But he's also a novelist, which is an interesting pairing to me. Not only that, he's a suspense novelist and a romance novelist. Okay, we have lots to talk about. He's the author of books including Claiming Carter, Kingpin, and the Therapist series. Welcome to the show, W.S. Greer.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me because your life and your career and your writing and all of that, it's such an interesting mix, right? I mean, it's not every day that you talk to a member of the military who also writes romance. Tell me how did you get into what drew you? You were writing about suspense first, right? But then you transition into a lot of romance. Like there's a lot of romance on your author page. How did you land there?
By complete accident. I don't even think it was something that I thought of beforehand. My writing life, I guess this road that I'm on, as a writer is just I just kind of follow it, wherever the ideas take me. And I'm at a point in my life where I want to write about stuff that I'm actually passionate about. While I still read and love suspense novels, my life is different than that. So, I try to fuse my passion for writing with, what comes naturally with passion when you're writing about stuff you know about. So I'm trying to stick with that. And once you do it once, you kind of oh, this is the best writing I've ever done. So now it's I gotta stick with what I'm good at.
So you feel like the writing of romance is the best stuff you've ever written? I thought I saw that on your website too, that there was something about it that you felt like it made you a better writer. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. So I mean, I love suspense, but take The Therapist, for example. It's about BDSM and there's a romantic element in there, but it felt real personal to me. And while there's been whenever I wrote Madman, which was it was romantic suspense, but it had a whole lot of suspense in there. When I finished writing that, I was like, well, this is the best writing I've ever done. But when I wrote The Therapist, it had such a strong personal connection to me. And that personal connection seemed to bring out this extra element of passion, and my creativity seemed to kind of grow just from that extra little kick of passion. So there's just something about it being real for me that makes me a better writer, makes me a little more creative in my writing process.
Okay, so for my viewers at home, tell them a little bit about let's go with the Therapist series, because that's the most recent series, right? So
that's right.
So tell my viewers at home a little bit about that series.
Okay, so The Therapist, when I first started writing it, I knew that I wanted to write a series that was about real issues. So it was real issues wrapped in fiction. So I made sure that my therapist was really good at his job, because I wanted whoever was dealing with issues that are in any one of those books, whether it's a breakup, from the guy's perspective, there's a lot of reasons why guys don't ever seem to really get it right. And then, from a woman being slut shamed to, a marriage dealing with infidelity, or just, a toxic abusive relationship, those are all real issues for relationships to deal with. So I wanted to tackle those real issues, but then have my therapist deal with his fictional stuff, that made him more of a do as I say, not as I do kind of a therapist. So getting to follow him while he tells his patients to do the right thing, and then see him do the opposite when he's in his life, because in the office, he's a therapist. Outside of the office, he's just a regular guy, and he's making the wrong decisions like a lot of us. So that's kind of what gave me the idea for all four of those books, him being a great therapist while also kind of sucking at life like some of us tend to do, because life is hard.
Oh, that's true. Oh, and it's so much fun when you're writing fiction to be able to delve into the parts of life that are hard and unpack them. Now, you are married, right? Your wife is also a writer, but you wanted to delve into these relationship issues. Is that because you were working out issues in your own marriage, or is this just in your own head? Do you know what I mean? How much of it is you trying to work out your own junk, and how much of it is you trying to explore junk that you don't face in your own life and you trying to imagine it. Do you know what I mean?
So I think it's probably 50-50. So being a part of the military, you see a lot of relationships that don't make it, unfortunately. So I took some stuff that I've seen other couples go through, and then there's some issues that we've gone through that I've been the cause of. I would never, throw my wife under the bus for anything. Not that she ever does anything wrong anyway. It's mostly me. So I took a real issue like the Fallout, for example, is about infidelity, and I'm not, ashamed to say that I've made mistakes, but that's why that book is in my opinion, the best book I've written. It might not be the most exciting story, but it's the best book overall because it's got that, that personal feeling. So it's kind of 50-50. I've seen relationships kind of crumble under the weight of the military. Usually it's guys just kind of doing it wrong. So that's what kind of gave me the original idea to go with book one.
I saw somewhere on your website where you were saying that you got into writing romance in part to try to help other people through relationships to get more comfortable with sex and get more comfortable with talking about all this stuff, because we're all so like puritanical and like ashamed of talking about sex. Is that part of is that really like part of why you write, part of why you put these books out into the world, is to, and what drove you to do that? Because a lot of people write only for selfish reasons, not for like, I want to help the world, but just because I gotta get it out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's part. I think it's therapeutic for me. Like I said, I'm kind of on the same line of I'm good at writing is my outlet anyway. So when I write about something I care about, but as humanity, we put all these rules around how we operate through life. We set a whole lot of like ourselves. We're put in these boxes all the time. So naturally, we don't want to talk about things that come natural to us, like sex. And then we're I'll speak from a guy's perspective, I guess, too egotistical to talk about relationships because we think that we know everything, even though most of the time we don't know. So I'm trying to, as a guy, it's more, while my audience is women, I think I'm trying to help men do better. Not that I'm the greatest. I'm not like, yo, watch me because I'm the king. Because like I said, I've definitely made mistakes. But I think the difference with me is I'm open-minded and I'm not ashamed to say that I have made mistakes. And here's what I learned while I was making these mistakes. And this is why we do better, because of these mistakes. So the audience is women, but at the end of the day, I really think I'm trying to write for men to kind of pay attention and kind of get their act together a little bit.
It is interesting though, because you have to be one of the few men writing romance. I mean, romance is such a genre written usually by women, about women, for women. There's a lot of like layers of the female over here in the in the romance world. Have you enjoyed being a rarity in that? And do you think about the fact that you're bringing a different perspective to it than everybody else? Does that factor into your writing process?
Absolutely. It's, I guess, the first part of the question. There's been times where I've hated it, and there's been times where, like, now I love it because over the course of the last year, I've gained a lot of new fans and I've gained a bigger social media following. So now, because there's more people, I seem to notice when they recognize that I am a male writer, that I'm a Black male writer. But I don't get lumped into some of the categories some of the other guys get thrown into. I guess I haven't read a lot of other male writers, but from what I understand, some of these male writers who write romance seem to kind of miss it a little bit. So I'm trying to make sure I don't get lumped in with some of the other writers who haven't really done the genre it's just due, I guess. But I love the fact that I'm different. I know some people would see me as, a male or automatically like, well, I'm not going to read that because of bad experiences in the past. But this year has kind of shown me that by gaining a following, people are starting to understand that I'm actually not just a male writer, which is important, but not. It's just that I'm a good writer, and that my perspective, because I'm male, is different than the way a woman would write. But I guess the ultimate goal at the end of the day is to make it to where when someone reads my books, they don't even think that it's a man who wrote it. I think that's the ultimate compliment for me is someone reading it and not being like, oh, I could tell a man wrote this. It's usually like, oh, I just found you on TikTok. I didn't know you were a man. And that's when I know I did my job right.
So you said that other male writers got it wrong. Where do you think, from storytelling and from like a genre perspective, you see other guys, you don't need to throw any other men under the bus, but other dudes getting it wrong that you feel like you're getting right in the storytelling and in the way you're presenting romance, or the way you're presenting female characters, is the way you're presenting, like which part of it do you think you're getting right that sometimes other guys miss?
Right. um Not putting my ego in the way and assuming that I know exactly how to write. Luckily, my wife is a writer and she's a huge reader. And luckily, the people who I'm affiliated with in the book world, um, they're all women. So um, I've had a lot of really great examples to what not to do. You know, I've seen people point out an entire paragraph, and I've seen some bad paragraphs out there written by some of these guys. So I'm like, all right, let's not do that. Luckily, writing is something I've been doing since I was 11, and I think I'm just luckily enough to be naturally good at it. But anything where I feel like I'm going to get it wrong, I refer to my wife. She reads everything that I write. So whenever I'm writing, I've gotten to the point now where I pretty much got it down because I've written a lot of books. But in the beginning, it was like, does this make sense? And as a reader, as a female reader, does this hit you any certain type of way? And she would tell me, like, actually, this paragraph sucks. The way you describe this is terrible, and you should go back and reword it. Maybe you should read so-and-so because she does a great job, But it's just getting my ego out of the way. Like, while I'm extremely confident in my ability as a writer, I'm never like, I can't learn anymore. I've learned as much as I need to. I just try to stay open-minded. As long as I'm willing to learn, I'll just keep getting better.
Okay, earlier in the conversation, you were talking about picking up followers on social media, right?
Mm.
Which is great. You want to be heard. You want to be read. I certainly do. Everybody does. Otherwise, you wouldn't be publishing freaking books.
Right.
But when you do start getting followers, does that ever get in your head? I ask this because when my first one came out and people, like strangers read it, which freaked me out because I thought no one was supposed to read your first book, right? And then they did, and they started commenting on it online and like sending me notes. I freaked out. It was like, oh, and I got really in my head. So has there been any part of the having a huge following that's gotten in your head? Are you so confident in what you're doing that you don't let that happen? Because if you are, I love you and you're now my spirit animal.
So when I first started writing, again, I'm still very sensitive. It's just when I first started, I didn't have a big social media following. So whenever I wasn't getting social media comments, I was getting reviews. And I made the mistake when I first started of reading reviews. And I learned pretty early on that you shouldn't do that. So now that I do have a good social media following, I'm already in the habit of not reading anybody's reviews anyway. So I see comments. I delete all the ones who are people trying to act like they want to hook up. And then all the rest of them I pretty much just ignore for the most part, unless it's something positive. I do see them all, but I think I'm good at just ignoring. I'm comfortable in my lane, and nobody's really going to sway me either, in either direction, unless it's my wife.
Okay, so you've been writing since you were 11 years old.
Yeah.
I was the same way. I started writing when I was 7, right? Like a little tiny kid writing stupid little stories. So did you always know did you always know I want to be an author, or did that particular dream take time to develop?
No, that was way late. So, I mean, I'm from Clovis, New Mexico. It's like Chicago, but like a really small version of that. So I mean, I grew up in the hood. So anything I was writing, it was like either music or it was poems. And that's what all of my writing was about. If it didn't have music to go to it, then I would just make it rhyme anyway, and I would just call it, a poem. So all of my really deep emotional stuff usually came out in the form of poems, and then when I was having fun, it was usually music. So I didn't even think about possibly shifting gears until I think it was like 2012, 2013. I was already in the Air Force. I was stationed out in Alaska at the time, and it happened by complete accident. And it was just kind of like this light bulb moment where I was like, I've been writing for a long time. I wonder, can it translate to books? It took me a while to kind of get it down, but then I quickly realized that, being a creative person who's able to put pen to paper and come up with a story, it will translate well. You still have to learn, but it's a good starting point. So I didn't feel like I was starting from scratch, at least.
What do you think starting out as a lyricist, basically? I mean, if you were writing to music and you were turning the rest of them into poetry, you were a lyricist. What did starting out as that type of writer change about your storytelling as you grew and as you have moved to noveling? You said they translate, but a lot of people feel like boy, those two things are separate and they don't really feed off of each other. I disagree. I think they do. But how did
Oh,
they feed
absolutely.
off of each other for you?
It still does. So whenever I outline my stories, I have written above some of my chapter outlines that says you make sure I use metaphors and similes because it's a part of what I was good at whenever I was writing lyrics to something that you can use really well if you know how to do it whenever you're writing novels. Um, so that was a huge part of it for me. And for a while, I was kind of in the same boat where I didn't think that those two things kind of translated. But once I realized that I could take just that small thing, like if I'm good at metaphors, how can I use this in what I write now? Man, once I realized I could do that, it made my writing so much better. And that's when I wrote Mad Men, which I thought was my best, which was my best at the time. Because writing that one, it was like, I need to use metaphors and similes a little bit more. And it just kind of opened up my vocabulary as a writer and maybe to where I wasn't so stagnant in every single sentence. Every single sentence is direct and it's right exactly what I'm talking about. I was able to talk about something without talking about it or find a more creative way to talk about it. So it absolutely does translate. You just got to not be afraid to make that connection. Once you make it, it makes your world so much bigger.
So you served in the military for a really long time. Like that is a fundamental part of your life when you have been in the military since 2004. Have you taken anything, whether it's discipline or whether it's a rhythm of something or whether it's sitting around telling stories when you're on base, or have you taken things from that part of your life and used them to help you tell better stories as a novelist? I mean, you already talked about the
Uh,
fact that you had like relationship stuff you were hearing. Just
mhm.
how has that informed your storytelling life?
Um, I don't think there's anything that's really informed my storytelling. I think it's what it's given me is the structure to be able to stick to a schedule because the military is real, real regimented. Because of that, I'm naturally like a schedule to-do list kind of guy. So kind of the same way I go through about my duty day, in the Air Force, I make sure I write to a schedule too. When I get off that schedule, I have writer's block. I take forever to finish novels, but when I stick to that schedule, it's like I'm a writing machine and my creativity stays, on point. And a big part of that is coming from, the regimented day-to-day stuff from the military.
Okay, then give my writers at home who are struggling with their own writer's block and trying to get it done and figure it out. What is your ideal schedule? When you sit down and you're feeling really regimented and you're feeling like you're on it, you're in a zone and you're cranking things out. What's your daily
Mhm.
schedule? And then how long does it take you to actually finish a project?
I prefer to write first thing in the morning, if I can. I don't expect any of my bosses are on here, so I think it'll be okay. So I usually, make coffee first, and then when my mind is still waking up and I'm sipping coffee, I like to get stuff out. So when I'm at my desk, I'll like make notes, or if I'm like free and clear because I've already knocked out, a bunch of stuff, and I've got my guys rolling because I'm an old guy in the military, so now I don't really physically do any work. I just tell other people to go do theirs. So once everything with work is taken care of, if I have, half an hour or an hour, I will write at work. Even if I have guys coming in, luckily, I have a 3-year-old, so I'm able to write kind of within the chaos. So yeah, I'd like to write, as early as possible. For me, it's just about cranking it out early. Usually in the evening, that's when I start getting tired. I can write in the evening, but I prefer not to. So for me, it's coffee and write first thing. And I try to do it every single day. I swear when I skip one day turns into 3 days and 3 days turns into 3 weeks. And then that's when I'm stuck. So I just try to keep it going. Like I'm finishing a novel now. It's a short story for an anthology. I'll be done with that on Thursday. By the time Saturday gets here, I gotta be moving on to the next thing. If I would take the entire weekend, it's like I get into this little rut. So it's just about consistency. I treat it like the gym. When you go to the gym all the time, that's when you see results. If it's sporadic, then you struggle through it. So just try to keep the consistency up.
And then how long does it take you to finish to write a novel on average? I know every novel's different, but how long
Right.
does it take you on average?
Um, I think somewhere between 2 and 3 months, depending on how long it takes the story to get out. I don't set like word count goals. I just whatever however many words it takes to get the story out. So usually when I'm writing a full length novel, I think of a full length novel as 70,000 words, even though I think technically it's like 40,000 or 60,000, something right in there. I think of it as 70 for me.
I write long ones. I don't know. Go ahead.
Right. So I try to think of 70,000 words, but if the story falls short of that, and it still is the way the story is meant to be told, and that's fine. If it takes me to 100,000 words, then that's fine. So they're just dependent on the length of the story until the story is ready to be finished. Handful of months. Hopefully, whenever I'm deployed here in January, I want to publish at least 2 books while I'm down there. I'll be down there for six months. So I want to publish 2 while I'm down there and already be working on, the 3rd book for the year if I can.
So while you're deployed, you're going to be writing novels. It's just so many writing students that would blow their minds, right? They would be like, I'm sorry, I have too much on my plate already. I can't do that. Is that why? Why are you so driven that you have to keep doing this? What is it about? What does writing give you? It has to give you something if you plan on continuing writing while you are deployed in the military. It has to give you. What does it give you? Because when you talk about this stuff, you light up. Like what? What does it give you?
I'm not sure I know anything better than I know writing because I've been doing it for so long. I mean, I met my wife when I was 15, but I was already writing for 4 years before I met her. So I don't think I know anything. This is how I express myself. Like I said, I'm an emotional person. And whenever I was a kid, that would come out in the wrong way. So it helped me to be able to write it down. And then I go back and I read that stuff, and it's kind of have, this sense of nostalgia. But I mean, it's just what I love. And now, as far as like my timeline is concerned, luckily I love it enough to be able to do it every single day, but I'm getting ready to retire from the military. So I'm trying to set my life up now to where I don't have to retire and then go get a job working for somebody else, while still, of course, trying to become an author. I want to retire and just be an author. So that's going to take a lot of work.
That's the dream, man. But boy, that is tough. You got to be out hustling it, right? Did you know when you became an author that so much of it is hustle, hop books, hop books?
No, not at all. I figured I could write it. Honestly, I didn't even know. I mean, indie publishing was just starting out whenever I was just starting out. But that's the hardest part for me at this point. I mean, I can write all day because I love it, but the social media stuff, constantly doing promo on, now there's like a million different, apps that you're supposed to be on. I didn't know it was this hard. And that's the part where I get home at the end of the day and I'm like, I don't feel like doing none of that shit, but you gotta do what you gotta do.
So when you look into the future, you're retiring from the military and you're hoping to just be a novelist, to just that's the goal, to just be selling books. Are you gonna stick in romance? Are you gonna go, but there's always a suspense element to your work, I think.
Yeah.
Are you gonna move genres? Are you happy where you are? Do you know yet? Are you just following a path? Do you plan that out? What's your future thought on this career, W.S. Greer?
So writing the Therapist series, maybe it was one book before that when I wrote Boss, because that had a very personal line in it. But writing the Therapist was the first time I felt like I had found my lane. Well, I like writing suspense and I like writing romantic suspense, but the Therapist really made me feel like I had written something that was like, I created this lane for myself that is perfect for me, that I'm passionate about, that I'm driven to do. That just happened to be romance. It had some erotica in there, and that'll be kind of come and go whenever, depending on the story. If it fits into the story whenever I come up with it, then, I'll write erotica too. But again, it's just, my life. I've been married for, just past 18 years this month. I've known my wife since I was 15. I'm 37 now. My life is romance, but all the ups and downs that come with romance. So it's not like I'll ever run out of content. So now I have this lane where it's reality wrapped in a fictional story. It's more of a challenge, and the reader might not ever know that, oh, that particular thing right there is something he's personally gone through. But I'll know it, and it fuels my writing. So I think I'm going to stick to romance, a little erotic romance in there too. But romance for me is really, I think, where I'm going to be going from the future. I think, and just like you were saying though, every story has some element of suspense in there. So I'll get my suspense kick too.
Well, you got to keep the reader turning the pages. One last question before I go, because I have to know, tell me a little bit about what your wife writes so that we don't leave her out of the conversation, so I can, talk about what your wife does when she's writing.
So yeah, my wife is Isabel Lucero, and she's usually writing contemporary romance, but then also she's gotten really big in LGBTQ romance. The last series that came out was and she's created a pretty big audience for herself in that. But she's kind of like me, where she writes a lot of romance, but she likes to do some suspense stuff. So when she writes for anthologies, just like me, all of my anthology stuff is 100% suspense. And most of her anthology stuff is suspense too. But then when she does just Isabel Lucero work, it tends to be romance or romance, and that's kind of, that just seems to be the lane that she created for herself too. But she likes to bounce around. She's great at whatever she writes. She's kind of like me, where I'm real picky about how I write and what I write. But once I nail down what I'm going to do, that is going to be awesome. And she's the same way. Whenever she finishes a project, it's always something dope. So if you haven't looked up Isabel Lucero, definitely go check her out, because she's incredible.
Oh, I love it. And I love that you're a married couple that are writing books over it. My husband is a sitcom writer and a comic. I don't have a fellow book writer at home. That's what I'm missing. I'm kidding.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining me. This was a fascinating conversation. You're a fascinating guy doing a lot of interesting stuff, and you sit at the intersection of some really interesting things. And I'm so glad that there are Black male writers writing romance novels, because we need some, something different than just women writing for women. We need it, man.
Right. That's so true. Hopefully I can inspire more, and we can keep this thing diverse with great writers. But thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much. It was so fun.
Thank you so much for joining me. And everybody else, read W.S. Greer's books, and I will see you.
Time with Stephanie story time virtually. We've got time and plenty of stories, talking stories in a novel way. Story time with Stephanie Story.